I just made the brand new Webshooters from Spider-Man Brand New Day. The absolute tsunami of content from Spider-Man Brand New Day has been flooding the internet over the last weekend. We've seen lots of set photos and videos of explosions and Spider-Man swinging practically, which I'll be covering in a video very soon. Throughout this wave of media, we've gotten a pretty good look at the new Webshooters Spidey will be rocking in this new movie. Compared to the Far From Home Webshooters, these are a huge change. They're a lot more reminiscent of his homemade Webshooters, which I mentioned in yesterday's talk about the suit reveal. 7 years ago on this channel, I made a Webshooter tutorial for those exact Webshooters from Spider-Man Homecoming. Originally, I had made them out of cardboard, and then something similar to what we'll be doing today. I actually used door hinges back then, since I thought the cartridges of the big clunky Webshooters resembled them so much. So in today's video, we'll be using a very familiar set of supplies. I am aware that these are not screen accurate. I wanted to make this video for people who don't have access to a 3D printer and can't necessarily afford commissions. This is a quick, homemade option with supplies that you can find at home or at a local hardware store, which is the entire point of Peter Parker's new costume, so it feels fitting. Door hinges, a classic. Magnetic clasps for the cartridges, a red rubber sheet for backing and support purposes, and your adhesives of choice. I'm using hot glue and Loctite super glue this time around. Oh yeah, and you'll definitely need some magnets unless you plan on gluing these to your suit. To start, lay out all of your materials and take note of what you have. If you're missing anything, come back once you've collected all your materials. Unpackage everything so we have direct access and put any screws to the side. We aren't going to need those. I wanted to make sure I got the sizing of the Webshooters right, so I pulled up some of the many set photos that have come out recently and compared it with my own wrist. To get the right dimensions, I simply measured an appropriate length that looked similar and a little less than the width of my wrist. This may not be 100% to scale, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks on a suit, so I don't think we're too far off. The dimensions I used for my particular wrist was 1.75 inches in width and 4 inches flat in length. This may vary for you, everyone has different wrist sizes, so we're bound to have conflicting measurements at some point. It's definitely worth sizing to you specifically, as once you start attaching all of the metallic bits, you'll need to trim those base plates a bit more. Speaking of, once you've got that red rubber rectangle cut out, we're going to start connecting these metal hinges to our backing plate. For this portion of gluing, I'll be using hot glue. It seems to do a bit better when it comes to metal. Some super glue is labeled to work on metal, but I've always had better luck using this. Once we open up those hinges and lay one after the other on this rubber base, you'll have something like this. What you're seeing on top of those hinges are actually just some magnetic clasps. We'll be using these as the cartridges of the Webshooters, and they are swappable, which you'll see more of in just a minute. If you have any overhanging rubber on those backing plates, make sure to trim that up before starting the gluing process. After you've done that, go ahead and lay the base back down without the hinges on it. We're going to outline where the hinge will lay with hot glue on all edges except the bottom. We want to leave a little bit of space so that red rubber is peeking through the metallics. You'll then line up the first hinge with the base plate and place that down firmly until it dries. These smaller hinges aren't too terribly heavy, so the hot glue holds just fine. Go ahead and follow through on the bottom hinge in the same way. If you choose to, you can add another strip of hot glue down the middle as well. Obviously, if you're making 2 Webshooters, you're going to want to repeat this process twice. If you're only rocking 1 for now, then technically you're finished. I'm assuming you plan to wear this with a suit though, right? So we're going to need to find a way to attach that. Once you've got your Webshooter or Webshooters finished, go ahead and line that up and trace the same shape onto your leftover rubber. Once you're sure of your tracing, take it off and cut that out. This will act as the piece that goes under the costume that will firmly magnetize the Webshooter to your wrist. I started with some magnetic 3M strips. I figured these would work well to line the bottom of the Webshooters with. I cut 4 strips of the same length and put them in each corner. To add some extra support, I'm going to alternate back to the smaller round magnets I mentioned in the beginning of the video. I put 5 evenly spaced magnets on the bottom between the magnetic strips. You'll then repeat this process on the bottom of your Webshooter plate to ensure that it'll match up under the suit. The middle magnets seemed really important to me, and they were held down pretty easily. They took to the glue quick, since the little guys were attempting to magnetize through the rubber to the hinge on the other side. Once these magnet plates were finished, I felt pretty secure in the idea that these would hold. Last stop was attaching the magnet plate to my wrist. For this, I was just using some regular Velcro strips and measured how much I'd need at each depth of my arm, and then just cut it to size. I started with just a top and bottom strip, but I do come back through and add another one in the middle, so I figured I'd let you know now. Some time passed while letting those dry, and new set photos dropped from Spider-Man Brand New Day, where he's swinging through the air with explosions behind him and on top of a car, so we'll be breaking all of that down very soon. Now for the moment of truth. Everything was dry, and it was time to test them with the suit. I put everything on, the Webshooters magnetized pretty easily, and then...
Misinput!
Yeah. You saw it go flying, right? So I guess the magnetic tape was just not strong enough. I probably should have seen this coming due to the little bit of extra weight, but we're all learning here. This was a pretty easy fix though. The one that fell kind of exploded, but with a little pressure, everything can easily come off of the Webshooter plates because the parts are hot glued. I restarted the process this time, not changing anything but magnet type. So let's fast forward through all of that. Strictly use these small earth magnets. I made sure to place them down in the middle again because that's where the hold was the strongest on the first set. I then went for the corners and any other areas that may have looked like points of stress. Magnets can be sort of tricky when gluing down in close proximity to another, so just be careful and take your time. Eventually, you should wind up with something like this. To match these to your base plate, you'll simply wait for the ones you glued to the bottom of the Webshooter to dry, and then put more magnets on top of that. This is where that gel super glue comes in very handy because I'll use just a small drop on each one of those magnets. Not so much that it spills over and glues to another magnet, but just enough to make it adhere to the rubber. Once they're all prepped with some glue, we'll take that base plate, line it up, and place it down firmly. You shouldn't have to keep it there long though, they tend to grab pretty quick. For the extra red detailing on these Webshooters, I just used a red paint marker. In what we have seen so far of these Webshooters, we can make out some red detailing between what looks to be the web cartridges. I thought of adding this after testing to see if the paint would stick on a spare hinge that I had. It'll add a nice layer of detail even though it's super simple. It worked, and I wanted to apply that to the Webshooters that I had made to achieve a similar effect. I removed the clasp cartridges, so I was left with just the blank base and door hinges. This left me with plenty of room to start applying the paint. This was really easily done by just lining the inner edges of the hinges with the red paint marker. As long as you're slow and don't go overboard, it lays on quite smoothly. We want to make sure there's enough it's visible, but not making it toward the outer edge of the hinge. Once you've lined both inner edges of the hinges, you'll be looking at something like this, and it feels like we're on the right track. I wanted to add some detailing to the cartridges as well, since they cover up the middle portion completely on my build. They're actually two separate magnetic pieces, so the idea came pretty swiftly. My plan was to just line the outer edge of the larger piece that sits toward the middle of the hinges. Laying them all out, I took the pieces and separated to smaller and larger groups before painting. Another very simple step with just one singular line going up the side of the cartridge. As long as you're careful, you shouldn't have any issues, so let's just fly through this. Make sure after you've painted all of the cartridges and you start to reassemble them, that the smaller part is sitting away from the detailing that we just painted. This creates the illusion that the red lining is traveling down the entire middle of the Webshooter, even though the cartridge is covering it. I'll say this is pretty cool, but what's going to shoot the webs? This time around, I grabbed a handful of screws from around the house and tried to find a match. I was using only flat screws, since obviously we don't want to put holes in the suit or ourselves. Attaching this was very simple. Using a small magnet, I put it on the front end of the Webshooter, and then attached a small screw to the end of that. This does seem to hold pretty fine on its own, but just for safekeeping, I did glue the magnet to the screw. And that's it! You have completely finished the Webshooters from Spider-Man Brand New Day. Again, I am aware that these are not screen accurate. I wanted to make this video for people who don't have access to a 3D printer and can't necessarily afford commissions. This is a quick, homemade option with supplies that you can find at your home or at a local hardware store, which is the entire point of Peter Parker's new costume, so it feels fitting. I also like this as an actual metallic option, which shines off of the light really well. I would have liked to have a bit more of the red show through than what we do end up with, but I think it's a substantial amount for what we're working with here. I'd say it's pretty hard to tell that these are inherently glorified door hinges from far away. In this photo I took in the mirror, it feels pretty close to what we've seen on set so far. Some people in the comments of Instagram and Twitter recently have been saying that these are actually just like clasps or something for the cables to attach to for the stunts. I don't particularly think that's true. There were quite a few interactions of Tom Holland in the suit talking to fans and things like that, and I don't think they would have left big clunky equipment on Spider-Man if they weren't actually his web shooters. Personally, I also just wanted to carry on this method that was a big part in my starting of this journey so long ago. I seriously hope this video helped you or entertained you in some way. I'll definitely be working on more versions of this in the future, so if you're interested in more cosplay, set, or rumor updates from Spider-Man Brand New Day, make sure to subscribe. Oh yeah, please let me know what you think of these web shooters and if you'll be making anything similar. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace.